Back Where They Came From by Mairead Brodie. We were never sure when or why my grandparents chose not to be Americans. There was the Wall Street crash, of course, and the Depression that followed. There was all of that social turmoil and fear that came with it. My father seemed to think that my grandparents might have lost what meager savings they had. My grandmother only ever said they came back because they came into land. A 60-acre smallholding guarded fiercely through land wars and civil war and upheaval. There was no one left to farm it, with every one of my grandfather's many brothers beyond in New York. Maybe that 60 acres of rocky land in the west of Ireland seemed like a safer bet than clinging by their fingernails to the fringes of the middle class in Staten Island. There was one last story my father told us about New York, however. My grandparents' first child was born at the hospital there, a girl that my grandmother named Mary, like nearly all firstborn Irish daughters at the time. My grandfather was kept out of the delivery room, as was normal in those days, and when he was finally called to the hospital to see my grandmother and their first child, it was only to be told that he was a father no longer. The baby had died shortly after birth, so he found himself childless before he had even seen his child. And they never told him to turn up to the hospital like that, the shock of it. As a teenager, when my father told us this story, I would see my grandfather in my mind's eye, bounding up the steps of the hospital, hopes high, a neat trilby on his head, wearing his Sunday suit and tie and carrying a bunch of flowers in his hand. Reaching the doors, he pauses, mid-bound, as a stern matron approaches him to deliver the news, and he freezes, speechless, the flowers dropping out of his hand. Crushed flowers and crushed dreams. I can't possibly know what really happened. My grandfather was a quiet man and, in a way of his time, never spoke of his feelings if he could help it. My grandmother did often speak of her first baby, however, her American daughter, who barely lived. If anyone ever said she was the mother of 8 children, she would always remind them with a smile that she was, in fact, the mother of 9, not 8. And everyone would smile back and nod in silent recognition of her loss and a lifelong bond. This sorrow seemed to be my grandmother's abiding memory of her life in New York, and maybe why she never spoke about the years she lived there. The only window I had into that time in their lives was their crumbling photo album from those first years of their married life. It sat up high on a shelf with other forgotten papers, yellowed from years of peat smoke. The first time I leafed through it, I was about 10 years old and fascinated by the fun young people in the photos. There was my serious, pious grandfather, smiling like I had never seen, lined up with his brothers in their smart coats and trilbies, a skyline of half-built skyscrapers and cranes behind them. My grandmother sits happily on Midland Beach, a popular beach resort of the day, surrounded by friends. There they were on outings to upstate New York, Sullivan County, my grandfather in an old-timey bathing suit in the river. There were even some fun, goofy photos with their friends, making faces with a camera, a 1930s version of an Instagram feed. No sepia filter needed. My grandparents left for home in 1933. Their baby had been born and died the previous year, so it is tempting to conclude that this lost signaled the end of fun and youth. Maybe it hurt them more than anything else, more than any stillborn American dream. They did what xenophobes today want immigrants to do. They went back where they came from. My grandmother was pregnant with my uncle by then, but he was born in Ireland, not an American. He grew up to become a priest, a staunch defender of the faith, something that was a source of immense pride to my devout grandmother. From my earliest years then, I've known that immigrant stories do not always go in one direction. Some of us emigrate and stay for good. Some of us stay for a while to build up new lives, but move on eventually to somewhere else. And some of us do indeed go back to where we came from. Which immigrants stay and which ones leave? Which immigrants are welcome and which are not? The rhetoric from some today wants to classify immigrants into those who are useful and wanted, and those who are takers from shithole countries who bring violence and drugs. Those who immigrate for the right reasons, and those who are just cheating the system. There is a desire to sort the wheat from the chaff, the refugee from the economic migrant. But immigrant lives are never that simple. No one's life is simple, easy to categorize. Was my grandfather a refugee for political oppression and civil war, having been interned without trial under suspicion of terrorism during the Anglo-Irish War of Independence, a refugee from an early British prototype of Guantanamo Bay? Or was he simply another economic migrant looking for a better opportunity in life? Like most immigrants, I think my grandparents were looking for a combination of political refuge and economic opportunity, and maybe even just as change of scene, a fresh start. Immigrants do not always fit into the neat categories assumed by our modern visa classifications. Economically, my grandparents would have certainly had a better life in Europe than they did in rural Ireland, raising 8 children on a small holding in hard economic times with the rationing of the Second World War can't have been easy. They were no longer lonely. My grandmother isolated in an empty suburban house waiting for my grandfather to get home from work. She had neighbors again, her mother-in-law, her own family all around her, people she knew and trusted. My grandparents were fortunate that they had a safe place to go back to. Life as an immigrant can be lonely. It requires strength and determination to build a new life from nothing. Not everyone is able for it. My grandfather said he saw the best of people, people who had fought for Irish freedom like he had, succumbed to drink and despair in the Bowery in New York, lost in a foreign city, away from everything they'd ever known. If the modern asylum system had existed then, these men would have counted as political asylum seekers, fleeing Ireland's civil war and the dire rural poverty of a country barely emerging from years of colonialism and war. Yet to the prejudiced American eye of the day, these broken men appeared as drunken Irish bums, losers who had nothing to offer this country. Today, suspicion about immigrants and their right to be here is stronger than it has been in many decades. Some of the same hateful rhetoric and smear tactics that sank the 1928 presidential campaign of Al Smith, the first Catholic to run for president, resurfaced in 2016. This time, the hateful rhetoric was directed at the first woman who dared to aim for the White House, Hillary Clinton. The winning campaign appealed not to a grand vision for a greater America as claimed, but to the narrow prejudices of small-town and rural voters against urbanites, liberals, and immigrants. The hurt caused by 2016's election rhetoric still resonates with many of us. As a relative to prosperous residents of Silicon Valley, it would be easy to step back and disassociate myself from the immigrant experience. I could term myself an expat and hide behind my racial and economic privilege. I am white. I speak English. When Trump talks about building a wall to keep out bad hombres, I can assume he's not talking about me. Yet I feel an obligation. I come from people who have had to immigrate for a better life and seek safer places outside their home countries, even if they eventually went back to where they came from. I had the chance to come back again, even if it cost me something too. I can't sit in privilege and watch as we seek to deny that chance to others.